Now, the African Export-Import Bank has formally onboarded its new president, Dr. George Lumbi. But the grand ceremony, attended by hundreds of delegates for Lumbi's inauguration, was also used to give a hearty goodbye to Professor Benedict Oramah, the man at the helm of the bank for the past 10 years. I was in Cairo, Egypt, with the Arise News team recently for those events. Enjoy the package. It's a moment of change for this iconic institution, the African Export-Import Bank, the end of a tenure of President Benedict Oramah as the head of this iconic institution, and a new horizon of a new president, Dr. George Lumbi.
Our continent continues to navigate complex and evolving challenges, from issues of peace and security to the imperative of inclusive and sustainable development, economic resilience, institutional strengthening, and enhanced global influence. In responding to these challenges, three things matter: vision, partnership, and strong institutions. Since the signing of our cooperation agreement in 2018, Afreximbank has proven to be an indispensable partner in driving Africa's integration, industrialization, and economic transformation. Working jointly with the African Union and our member states, Afreximbank has contributed to reducing barriers to intra-African trade, expanding trade-enabling infrastructure, and operationalizing the instruments that give concrete meaning to the African continental free trade area. Through this cooperation, Afreximbank has helped shift the paradigm of Africa's economic outlook, fostering value addition, strengthening industrial capacity, and advancing African agency and its voice within the global economy. Africa has never been short of thinkers. But history does not reward ideas alone. It rewards delivery.
Over the past 3 decades, Afrexim has evolved from a visionary idea into a world-class African institution, one that has consistently embodied excellence, innovation, and resilience. Guided by successive leaders, the bank stands at the center of Africa's transformation, financing trade, building industries, and unlocking the immense potential of intra-African commerce. Egypt is proud to be both a founding shareholder and a host of the bank's headquarters. Distinguished guests, more than serving as a source of essential resources, a hub of demographic growth, and a frontier for future markets, Africa offers a future labor force and consumer market that will drive global growth for decades. The African Continental Free Trade Area is unlocking new opportunities by creating the largest single market in the world.
Although I wasn't the most experienced when I came on board, I took up my responsibilities with great enthusiasm, eager to learn, in full belief that fate had placed me, the bank, and the continent on this path together. Upon assuming office as president of the bank in September 2015, I outlined an agenda for my presidency. At that time, it seemed quite ambitious, even an overreach for many. However, given the significant challenges facing our continent, including the resurgence of the commodity crisis reminiscent of the 1980s, a waning hope for industrial transformation, and regression in trade and economic integration, I thought that we could not afford to be lethargic. I was convinced that after 21 years of solid operations, it was time for the bank to more robustly take on the key purposes of its establishment. I thought that the bank had become of age to begin to ask important questions.
Now, transforming Africa's trade is at the heart of everything that Afreximbank stands for. But let me walk you through some of those initiatives and the portfolio of offerings that supporting the continent over the last decade and available even into its future. For example, the managed independent funds and the various portfolios of what is available to support trade on the continent. And what about some of the strategic initiatives over the past decade or so of Benedict Oramah, and of course, as we see a new transition? These are strategic initiatives that are being onboarded today to support the continent. For example, the medical sciences, for example, healthcare. You have the creative and entertainment sector, the support for the energy resource segment of the continent. Then you have the intra-Africa trade. But of course, you've got other initiatives around the payment system, the ATG Connect, and of course, the handshake from the continent to the Caribbean with the Africa-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum. There's a lot on ground to support the continent, despite the transition of leadership at the Afreximbank. Now, from a farewell conference for President Benedict Oramah to the investiture ceremony of President Dr. George Elombe of the Afreximbank.
I, George Elombe, appointed President of the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, at the 32nd Annual General Meeting of Shareholders held on 28th June 2025, solemnly declare and undertake before the chairman of the general meeting and before the members of the board of directors that I will abide by the provisions of the agreement for the establishment of the African Export-Import Bank, its charter and rules and regulations, and that I will discharge my duties and functions as laid down therein with loyalty, discretion, and conscience, and I will regulate my conduct as president with the interest of the bank only in view.
With the same drive that has brought us this far, we will rise to meet the expectations of our shareholders and our continent's leadership. We recognize that only a strong and well-capitalized institution can make the scale of investments and interventions required to transform Africa's trade and the trade infrastructure and the development landscape. But what is it that gives us confidence that such growth, that level of growth is attainable within a relatively short time frame? The answer lies in our strategic focus. The focus on export processing and industrialization, the engines of wealth creation and value addition. We would rely on our own resources to do so. Honorable Drew, the paradox you described, by some coincidence, I think my colleagues and I who put this statement together also did think of the similar paradox along the same lines. You had no money, so you asked for money, you were told you were too poor to get the money. And when you had the money, you were told you were too rich to get some more. But we also did describe here that We've been investing in the wrong places. So if we invest in export processing, we get more money. And as we get more money, we'll be able to invest more. And the additional investment would produce the capital that we need to get ourselves to the level we intend to. So sometimes paradoxes. When we add value, we create wealth. And when we create wealth, we expand our capacity to reinvest. A growing base of retained earnings from reinvestment will enable us to strengthen the balance sheet of your institution. It will enable us to disburse more funds for high-impact projects, which in turn generate wealth and further drive growth.
What are the feelings about what to expect from the new helmsman of the bank?
Your election is not merely an institutional transition. It is a promise, a source of hope, an expression of the trust that Africa has placed in your hands. I had the honor of receiving you in Yaoundé the day after your election, and I was struck by the clarity of your vision to make African finance an instrument of structural transformation, mobilize new resources, boost our private sector, and give Africa the means to speak on equal terms with the rest of the world. Mr. Chairman, your investiture comes at a time when the international context is experiencing profound changes. African economies are operating in an uncertain global environment marked by slowing global growth, persistent inflation, high commodity prices, high debt levels, geopolitical tensions, and the effects of climate change.
I think with George, I am really very, very confident that the bank will go to the next level. They will actually try to transform a lot of African economies, a lot of countries in Africa, to make sure that we connect where we will now be trading by ourselves. The issue that we always have in Africa is that we don't really trade among countries, and it's one of the major themes of Afreximbank, which I believe George will actually take Afreximbank to the next level.
The good thing about George Lombe taking over is someone that has been in Afreximbank for several years. So he's part of the growth of Afreximbank. And he understands the vision and where the bank wants to position itself as a continental, regional, world financing institution. So having someone like George Lombe, and that's the good thing about Afreximbank, their succession plan is quite remarkable.
The bank was first headed by Mr. Edodu and then Ekra. But with Mr. Edodu, at the very beginning, was Ekra, Elombi, and also Orama. And I was just speaking to Mr. Edodu, and how happy he is that the vision that was formed in those early days, refined with every new generation, obviously highly refined by Orama, and I have no doubt that George Lombe, being the fine man that he is, will take the bank to the next level. And obviously, we're now looking at the future.
Now, after decades of building blocks for a prosperous future of Africa, the new helmsman at the African Export-Import Bank, Dr. George Lombe, will have a legacy, a rich one indeed, to drive the bank into a new horizon. Reporting for Arise News, I am Bosin Omofaye in Cairo, Egypt.